answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Spoke with President Trump for 20 minutes about the situation with Iran. He talked about Project Freedom and the U.S. efforts to guide vessels through the Strait of Hormuz, issuing a new warning to the Iranian regime, saying if the Iranians try to target U.S. ships in this area, they will be, quote, blown off the face of the earth. Remember, this was a project implemented by the Americans overnight to assist the hundreds of vessels that are currently trapped in the Persian Gulf. We're talking about more than 20,000 sailors, and the president told Fox he's doing this for humanity. Some of these sailors were running out of food and supplies on these vessels due to the Iranian threats that are ongoing in this area. And again, the president saying that if U.S. ships in the region are targeted, the Iranians will be blown off the face of the earth. Now, I also asked President Trump about the possibility of negotiations with Iran succeeding. He said the Iranians are being far more malleable than they were being in the past, showing flexibility given the U.S. pressure that continues as part of the American blockade of Iranian ports.
That is Trey Yanes to Fox News. And that last part he's talking about, Trump is saying the new regime or the latest successors to those already wiped out by the U.S. appear to be more malleable. In other words, the deeper we get into the ranks of the Iranian regime or those who are trying to lead it, they're beginning to accept their fate and realize we really need to work with America and maybe not continue to shout death to America just to save our own skins. And, of course, he was referring to that blockade we put in place and the fact that Trump said we're going to start escorting and guiding ships through the Strait of Hormuz. During that first day of operation yesterday, Iran did conduct several attacks on our U.S. Navy ships that were also passing through the strait and other commercial vessels, hitting none of them. And General Kane says the Iranian attacks, and I'm quoting, were below the threshold of restarting major combat operations. And, of course, you have those on the left saying, no, you are violating the War Powers Act. You've exceeded your 60 days. No, we actually stopped prior to that target date and then have tried to work out a peace. Makes no difference to the left. They want to destroy Trump, even if it means destroying America. Welcome to hour number one, Larry Connors USA. Cinco de Mayo, May the 5th, 2026. And with Larry Connors USA, you get news, analysis, opinion, and education. We're here on the air for you every day from 6 to 8 p.m. In our next hour, getting illegals off the welfare rolls. Trump is taking action to do that. And this is protecting your money, your Social Security, your welfare benefits, instead of letting it be stolen by illegals in the country, admitted through the open border policy of Joe Biden. Thank you, Joe Biden. And later in this hour, a prediction. Are you listening? A prediction. You will not, in the near future, admit you even voted for Trump. Really? Wait till you hear who makes that prediction. That's coming up a little bit later. And our story behind the story today, the Concorde jet, Mach 2, New York City to London, about 3 hours. And then it all went away. What happened? Oh, and also make note of this date, 1961, the first American in space, Alan Shepard. On this date, 1961. So as we continue to watch how things are playing out in the strait, the U.S. military said Apache and Seahawk helicopters hit 6 Iranian boats that were threatening commercial shipping, and we did repel missile and drone attacks. Iran's latest warning is that we're going to continue to go after those ships and your Navy vessels as well. And you heard what Trey Yanks said. Trump said, we will blow them out of the water and blow them off the map, basically. General King, retired four-star general, talks about the defense we have for our troops in that region.
It's a layered defense that goes scores of miles out from the Straits of Hormuz with hundreds of aircraft, both manned and unmanned, in an air defense posture to defeat missiles, anti-ship missiles, and drones coming to hit a target in the Straits of Hormuz. The second part of that is a dome defense right at the Straits itself. Think of a dome making certain that nothing from the land there, immediate land-based, and nothing that penetrates through that layer of defense, and certainly that's possible, it would be dealt with right at the Straits then in terms of terminal defense. And then if there's anything coming from the sea, both on the surface or underneath the surface, it will be defeated. So there's going to be that kind of dome over the Straits to protect it in terms of terminal defense.
And again, that layered defense means you've got to get through various layers before you can actually get to our troops. That does not mean to say they're not in harm's way. They most certainly are. And you got the French president coming forward, Macron, speaking with the Iranian president today. Macron's pointing out that we have maintained a consistent position from the start. We call for cessation of all hostilities. Does he not know that Iran has ballistic missiles which can hit right into the heart of France? And I'm looking at a piece even published by CNN. Parts of the Iranian nuclear supply chain appear to have survived U.S. and Israeli attacks. And keep in mind, that is the key reason we're there. So in addition to General King talking about their layered defense, he said we're still trying to work with these shipping companies and get them safely through the strait.
For a couple of weeks now, CENTCOM has been talking to ship owners, the ship insurers, and actually the captains of the ship. Mm-hmm. And there's a number of ships that once we're able to achieve security and the lane is already clear and we feel comfortable about the defense I just described being in place, there are ship merchants and owners who are willing to move their ships through the straits.
And that's a key point. And in part, some of them had not done it because they've been informed by the insurance companies of those ships. We're not going to insure you if you go through there. So if Trump and the U.S. do not provide security for them, everything will stop going through. We don't care as long as it's Iran not getting its oil out, but we are willing to help other nations. Where is NATO? Where is France and the other nations? They're sitting quietly again, waiting for us to do the heavy lifting. And yet the leftists continue to try to spear President Trump. Listen to MSN Now, pompous arse that he is, Lawrence O'Donnell.
Well, on day 65 of Donald Trump's illegal war, Donald Trump threatened another war crime, this time telling a Fox reporter in a telephone interview that Iran will be, quote, blown off the face of the earth if Iran attacks United States Navy ships in the region. Donald Trump's war became fully illegal last week, and Donald Trump seems to know that.
What they call a military operation, you know, they don't like the word war, and they call it a military operation because that way you don't have a war, you don't have legal problems.
Legal problems. That was day 62 of Donald Trump's war, and he had a legal problem. By the time Donald Trump said that, even Donald Trump seemed to know that the War Powers Act, passed in 1973, made Donald Trump's war illegal last week. The War Powers Act says that the president can launch military operations for a maximum of 60 days, quote, unless the Congress has declared war or has enacted a specific authorization for such use of United States armed forces. And today, on the 65th day of Donald Trump's illegal war, he chose this childish language to continue his violation of the War Powers Act.
Our country's booming now, despite the fact that we're in I call it a mini war.
A mini war.
As I said, Lawrence O'Donnell, pompous arse that he is, trying to negate everything we're trying to accomplish. And again, even our own allies are not stepping up to the plate as they should. The French President Macron did say any unilateral escalation against tankers, container ships, or third countries is a mistake that fuels war and leads to escalation. Well, that's what exactly they've been doing. Macron, why are you not calling out Iran for doing so? There's a leftist mouthpiece who had and still is posing as a Republican, has a prediction about anyone who has voted for Donald Trump.
I just feel bad for the people that are being misled down this path. But I guarantee you something, and I know this. In 5 or 10 years, there won't be a single person left in this country that will ever admit to supporting Donald Trump, except for those that have their stuff all over Twitter. Because I think the speed at which he's spiraling, I mean, we're a year and a half into him. The speed at which he's spiraling, I think, is just going to increase. And eventually people are going to be like, yeah, we've had enough.
Yeah, you would hope. You would hope. I'll tell you his name, and then you tell me if you even remember who he is. Adam Kinzinger. Now, some of you might say, especially if you're in Illinois, yeah, I remember that guy. He was a Republican elected in Illinois. That's correct, as a congressman. But Adam Kinzinger fueled the hate Trump, joining the Russian collusion story and piling on. And now he's stating, I don't think there will be a single person left in this country in 5 to 10 years who will ever admit to supporting President Trump. How many regret supporting you, Adam Kinzinger? How many want to forget that they ever did know you and probably have already forgotten they do? There's a former Clinton pollster who's making a prediction. Listen carefully.
This is closer than people think it is. People are unhappy with the economy. They're unhappy with the Republicans, but they're also even unhappier with the Democrats. And so you have to say, is this election going to be a referendum on the Republicans, in which case that's bad, or is it going to be a choice? And are the Republicans going to be able to make it a choice? If they do that, when I ask who do you have more confidence in to handle the economy, Trump and the Republicans or the Democrats in Congress, Trump and the Republicans win that 53 to 47. So, yes, people are really suffering in terms of the way they perceive the economy, and they're unhappy with the way it's going, but the Democrats haven't stepped up and shown that they will do a better job. And that's why I think this election, although usually the in-party goes out, is still closer than most people think.
And that is former Clinton pollster Mark Penn regarding the midterms. It is closer than many think it is. He said, yes, people are unhappy with the Republicans and certainly Donald Trump. But then he added, they seem to be more unhappy with the Democrats. And I would say rightly so. And based upon that, keep in mind something else. Governor Pritzker is now saying, can we just move on? I want to move on from losing. He did that in an article and an interview with Politico, basically saying, I just want us to move on. I want us to win again. We need to quit going over the past. That was Governor Pritzker. We want to move on from losing. But, of course, you're dealing with anti-Semitism inside your own ranks, the Trump hatred, and the basic failure of the leftists. And that includes dealing with folks like Fetterman who are actually trying to walk a straight line for Democrats, not falling onto the left side as deeply as the leftists want to hijack them. And CNN senior commentator Van Jones responded to efforts to convince Fetterman of Pennsylvania to lead the party by saying, it just shows you how nutty things have gotten, that somebody who wants to stick up for Israel and does not want an open border somehow now has to be a Republican. That's completely insane. I would think that John Fetterman would not fit in the Republican Party any better than I would. But he's talking sanity, Fetterman. We don't want to turn our back on Israel. We don't want an open border. That doesn't necessarily make you a Republican. It shouldn't, but it does nowadays because the far left has hijacked the Democrat Party. As long as they have a gun to their head, they're going to continue to walk the line they want them to. But then a former Trump campaign advisor talking to Van Jones on the CNN program said, but your party, the Democrats, Van, your party doesn't want him. And Jones answered, yeah, I know. Listen, I think a lot of the stuff is just what people do to throw shade and criticism. John Fetterman is a great man. He's a great American. He's a maverick. We need people like that in this party. But I don't get it. He's not going to be a Republican. He should be able to be a Democrat and not get a bunch of nonsense thrown at him. I second that remark. But that's the issue inside the Democrat Party right now. You cannot speak your mind and speak sanely because you're not falling under the premise, the headline, the tabloid presentation of the leftists. You've got to hate Jews, and you certainly have to hate Trump, and you probably have to hate America if you're going to be a Democrat in today's Democrat Party. And they still can't figure out why they're coming undone. I love it. Absolutely love it. Coming up, a gunman, of course, was shot near the White House yesterday. I'll have more on that story. It turns out to be a crazy from Texas. Yes, there are crazies inside Texas. I'll be the first to admit that. And we'll also hear from Dr. Oz on protecting your Social Security and your health benefits being stolen by illegals. Plus, the story behind the story of the Concorde jet from New York to London in 3 hours, and then all of a sudden, the whole project went away. What happened? The story behind the story, still to come. You don't want to go anywhere. Lock and load, ready on the right.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
Another day must be another roofer in town. And John Beal and I were talking. He said, you know, every time you turn around, there's a new roofing company. Many of them have no idea what they're doing, and the statistics show that many will be out of business within 2 to 5 years. Who are you going to call to help you then? You need to remember only one name, John Beal. John Beal Roofing. You have a problem, he can take care of it. And we'll be here for you. John Beal Roofing. Call 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF. Spring weather has everyone sneezing, even inside their home or building. Instead of saying Gesundheit, call Wellington Environmental to perform air tests to determine if mold levels are too high. Gesundheit is the same as saying bless you after someone sneezes, the German word meaning wishing you good health. Wellington Environmental can perform air testing that is simple, fast, and can identify issues keeping you from having good health. Wellington does the same for hospitals and nursing homes for indoor concerns. Give them a call. It's simple. 314-644-4930. 644-4930. Tell Cindy, I need air sampling. They've seen it all. They can help you. Next time you hear Gesundheit, think Wellington. Wellington Environmental. Be well with Wellington. True comfort is something you should feel every day in your home. It's the quiet of your mornings, the consistency of your indoor temperature, the way your home feels season after season. With Renewal by Andersen, from consultation through installation, everything is handled by one experienced team, built around your home, your schedule. Our exclusive Fibrex material, stronger than vinyl, built for extreme temperatures. And right now, you can save 20% off your entire project. Plus, take an additional $100 off every window and door, up to $1,000. 20% off the entire project. Flexible financing is available, but you need to call by April 30th. 877-WINDOWS. RenewalByAndersen.com. 877-WINDOWS. RenewalByAndersen.com. It's that time of season when families, businesses are moving. For local or long distance, I endorse McGuire Moving. Get a date set soon before the schedules are booked. 314-241-0600. 241-0600. McGuire is constantly giving back to our veterans, such as Support Dogs for Our Brave. So with McGuire, you're getting excellent service and helping our vets. McGuireMoving.com.
This is News Talk STL.
I'm chasing tail lights straight as a crow flies, hunting justice down a country road. I've got a shotgun, it's riding shotgun, and we're both fixing to unload. Son, I know what you've done. There's only one way to outrun me. You better pray your tank don't beat mine to eat.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
The White House briefly went under lockdown after a suspect allegedly shot at Secret Service just 4 blocks away. Here by the Washington Monument, the Secret Service said officers spotted a gun and tried to stop a man who allegedly fled and fired in the direction of the Secret Service.
Not long before this shooting occurred, the Vice President's motorcade did transit through this area.
Officers returned fire, hitting the suspect. A young bystander also was struck in the crossfire.
It's a juvenile, did not sustain any life-threatening injuries, but he's also receiving treatment at the hospital.
And again, that is part of a news report regarding the shooting happening near the White House yesterday. Today, the Secret Service identifying the man as, or D.C. police rather, identifying him as a 45-year-old from Texas. The motive, still not very clear. He was spotted, as you heard, near the White House, near the Washington Monument specifically, and carrying a pistol. And when police Secret Service went to check on him, he pulled out the firearm and opened fire. And they, in turn, fired back and engaged him. He has been hospitalized, and as you heard, a juvenile was hit, a child struck by a bullet during the exchange of gunfire, caught in the crossfire. And that is not to say the guy was going to get to the White House or intended to and wanted to kill Trump, but this is, again, following the calls from the left and the hatred that they're fueling. You got all kinds of wackos coming out. And, of course, we had this the other day with the White House Correspondents Association dinner. And then the judge ended up making an apology to the man arrested and being held for taking a gun or trying to get inside the ballroom where the president and others were. Fox News dealt with that issue.
Judge Zia Faraqui apologized to suspect Cole Allen for the treatment he's received so far while he's been behind bars. He's been put on suicide watch by the Department of Corrections, and the judge was asking why. An attorney for the government said that he was put on suicide watch because he told FBI agents the night of the White House Correspondents' Dinner attack that he didn't expect to survive.
The judge apologized to this guy who's a killer, who, if he had gotten another couple yards, would have sprayed the whole audience in the Correspondents' Center. I mean, would have just sprayed him and killed God knows how many. And we're apologizing to this guy? I don't get that.
seems more concerned about his constitutional rights in some cases than others.
Constitutional rights.
Yeah. And keep in mind, when he apologized, said, "I'm sorry you were put in an isolated section of the jail." But I have no doubt the man did not think he was going to survive trying to get into the ballroom. He wanted suicide by cop, suicide by Secret Service. If he could also get Trump, that was really the prime goal. And then the judge issuing an apology. "Well, I'm sorry we have mistreated you." I know the guy is, quote, a suspect and charged, allegedly, all of this stuff. But look at the video, Judge. That's the guy coming through, obviously, with intent to do harm. And you sit there and apologize. I told you the other day, right after that event, there was a Wisconsin beer company. The guy that owns it was offering free beer in the event of President Donald Trump's death. Well, over the weekend, he announced that he was going to run for governor in Wisconsin, saying, "I believe Wisconsin needs a battle-hardened fighter to join the rest of America to save our democracy from Trump's regime." And that person does not exist in the crowded field of Democrats currently running. And this is the guy that was posting that if Trump dies by whatever means, we will have free beer for everyone on that day that he dies. And again, the left can't understand what's happening. Again, back to Governor Pritzker making his remarks to Politico. "I'm tired of losing. I want to move on from losing." You're not going to move on from losing with that kind of attitude permeating your ranks. I can smell it from here. Then, of course, trying to protect Americans, not just their lives, but their income, and especially from illegals who've come into the nation under the open border policy. They've been robbing your Social Security and your health care. We'll hear more from President Trump on that later. But there's some of the fraud that's been going on for some time in various sectors, and it's not just Minnesota. Dr. Oz on what's happening in California.
This is massive fraud. Now, we've already delisted 450 hospices. That is an unbelievably large number. And guess what? In that first tranche, no one's complained. No one's calling us and saying, no, we were innocent. They know they got caught. They're just going to go off and scam somebody else, which is what's happening, by the way. There's been a 7-fold increase of hospices in Nevada. People flee from California to Nevada. These scumbags just rinse and repeat. They're going to Arizona. They're going to Texas.
Why don't you throw them in jail? Just throw them in jail. I mean, put them in the pokey.
This is a big, big decision point. When you try to put people in the pokey, it takes years of careful investigations. That's how the system is built. But you know what I can do right now, Larry? I can stop paying you. And when we tell several hundred hospices, we're no longer paying you, guess what they do? They shut their doors and they run away.
Great. That's perfect. That starts. It's like getting rid of the termites and all the cockroaches. Dr. Oz was obviously on Larry Kudlow's program. Dr. Oz, the administrator for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And he said not one person, not one group called out of these 450 hospices complained and said, "No, we have done nothing wrong. We are innocent." You know why? Because they can't make that claim. And once again, Dr. Oz.
Let's get into the root cause of this problem. Nobody was paying attention. And when thieves steal, they corrupt the entire society. So these busts that you're witnessing here, conducted by Billy Asile, who's the U.S. attorney out there, are the first major efforts to show the people of Los Angeles that we are serious about this problem, which is wanton, out-of-control, rabid fraud, not just in hospice, by the way. There's also personal care services and other areas we'll get into. But let me put the numbers out there so everyone's clear. 1 in 3 hospices in America are in Los Angeles, not California, L.A. 1 in 3. I mean, how many people are dying there? Obviously, it's fraudulent. You have doctors selling their souls, basically, their license number, to open multiple hospice relationships. They dishonestly claim people are dying when they're not. If they steal your money, they will steal your life. They don't care at all about you.
They don't care about you. And damn it, they want you to die. That's why they set up this program. But even if you're not going to die, we're going to put you on there as a hospice patient. You're supposed to die. You will in time. And, of course, then we have the fraud in Minnesota. And when you begin to turn on the light, like I said, the cockroaches will start scurrying under the corners of the cabinets and into the dark. And that's what's happening in Minnesota. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz rapidly demoted the head of the state agency that oversees disbursement of social services program funding Medicaid, housing, and others. The Missouri Department of Human Services got cast into the national spotlight, where we found a fraud network connected to the Somalia community in Minneapolis. And the person that Governor Walz had appointed to serve as commissioner in leadership, she got booted from her leadership position yesterday because today she was set to face an official confirmation. Basically focusing on the scandal gripping the agency. She's been acting commissioner since 2025. And today she was to be officially confirmed. See, Walz is kicking her out because now you can say, well, boy, once I realized what's going on, I got rid of her. I'm done. We're going to run a pick-six game. They're all idiots, and they certainly don't hide showing it, do they? So Governor Walz quickly decides to remove and demote the head of his state agency that is part of the target of all the fraud inside Minnesota. And he put her there, and he knew it was going on. Trying to silence her at this point, saying, well, she's not the head of it anymore. You shouldn't be talking to her. Oh, no, we'll still talk to her. We'll still investigate. And, of course, maybe she'll turn around and bite him now when she does go into testimony. Oh, today, Secretary of State Rubio stepped up to serve as the White House press secretary as she began her paternity leave. But he did it just for today. I don't think he'll do it many more times. Coming up, the story behind the story. The Concord disaster. How it happened, what happened next.
You can connect with Larry on Twitter at Larry Connors USA.
I want to share something with you. Cooking a pizza using coal creates an amazing pizza. Only one place to get it, Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in Chesterfield. Of course, they offer a wide variety of pasta, but you just visit the website NapoliSTL.com, dine in or take out, and get ready for patio season. Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in Chesterfield Valley. Try it. You can thank me later. So many times, Vincent's Jewelers has helped me surprise someone special. Vincent's locally owned can do the same for you, and you don't have to break the bank to get something really nice, maybe even customized. The smile you're going to get back from that special someone, priceless. Check Vincent'sJewelers.com every day because new items are arriving and there are special deals. Vincent's, my only jeweler. Vincent'sJewelers.com. Vincent'sJewelers.com. True comfort is something you should feel every day in your home. It's the quiet of your mornings, the consistency of your indoor temperature, the way your home feels season after season. With Renewal by Andersen, from consultation through installation, everything is handled by one experienced team, built around your home, your schedule. Our exclusive Fibrex material, stronger than vinyl, built for extreme temperatures. And right now, you can save 20% off your entire project. Plus, take an additional $100 off every window and door, up to $1,000. 20% off the entire project. Flexible financing is available, but you need to call by April 30th. 877-WINDOWS. RenewalByAnderson.com. 877-WINDOWS. RenewalByAnderson.com. When insurance companies know you're represented by Onder Law, they know Onder is not going to let you be pushed around. Their reputation is built on years of courtroom battles. If you suffer an injury or damage to your property, serve the insurance company notice you have Onder Law on your side, a St. Louis firm you can trust to protect you at every term. Don't settle for less. You want to win? Believe me, Onder wins. Onder, O-N-D-R, onderlaw.com.
This is News Talk STL.
Some other guy that you knew before. When you do all those guys, you know I love you more. Took me by surprise, I must say. When I found out yesterday, ooh, I paid it to the grapevine.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Now, Larry Connors with the story behind the story.
In 1962, a treaty was signed by the French and British governments. They would pool resources and knowledge and work together to build the world's first supersonic commercial airliner. Both countries had already independently begun working on designs, one from the Bristol Aeroplane Company and one from Sud Aviation, and both had reached a stage where they were ready to build a prototype by the early 1960s. The Second World War had stimulated huge progression in aviation, resulting in the post-war jet age and the birth of supersonic flight. Money was pouring into commercial aviation in the 1950s, yet despite this industry boom, the cost of designing a supersonic airliner was more than the BAC or Sud Aviation, now called Aerospatiale, could manage. Thus, the treaty between France and Britain was signed, and the Concorde project was born. It was now up to the engineers and experts to turn this ambitious concept into a reality.
That is a section from the Imperial War Museum talking about the building of the Concorde, acknowledging that it was going to cost too much for one nation to do it. That's why Britain and France joined together. And keep in mind, the Concorde was going to be flying at Mach 2, 1,350 miles per second, 1,350 miles per second. The capacity as it was being designed, it would carry 92 to maybe 128 passengers, very little luggage. You had to limit how much you put on board. I remember one time looking at taking a flight on the Concorde over to England and then sailing back. The cost was very high, but they had a package deal together that made it look like a very good deal, but it just didn't work for my schedule. So they had started working on it, producing prototypes, and then they finally got to that first flight.
The world's first sight of a supersonic airliner. Sleek, purposeful, imposing. A supersonic airliner that will give Britain and France an assured and profitable place in the vast civil aviation market of the 70s. The debut of Concorde.
But the prototype aircraft were far from ready to be opened up for supersonic passenger flights. It would be another 8 years until Concorde would take her first commercial passenger flight in 1976. And that's where Concorde 101 and 102 came in. These pre-production aircraft were the third and fourth Concordes built. Their purpose was for the testing and refinement of all of Concorde's problems, from how to deal with ice buildup on the wings to seeing how Concorde would cope traveling at Mach 2 in thin desert heat. The testing of Concorde would go on for 7 years.
They would end up building a total of 20, but only 14 were actually put in place to be used as commercial carriers. And believe it or not, they'd even considered, for the safety of those on board, an escape hatch in case some disaster happened at Mach 2.
Most importantly, but never used, the escape chute. And in fact, it can be used at Mach 2, which sounds unbelievable. So how do you save a person who's jumping out of an airplane at Mach 2 when his legs are going to be the first to exit? When the red beacon is lit there, it's time to abandon ship, and the crew will probably say, let's go. So the process of this, thankfully it's never been used in anger, this hatch explodes back, the outer hatch explodes out, and this chute or blade slides down. And the idea of this shield is to stop your legs getting whipped away from you as you exit the outer hatch and getting dragged towards the engine. So you can actually escape from this airplane at Mach 2.
That was the idea. But when the disaster hit, it was not at Mach 2. July 25, 2000. Those on board had no chance. So yes, there is more to the story behind the story.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
Do you know why I endorse Cafe Napoli, all the locations? Visit any of them, and you will quickly appreciate the quality of food, service, atmosphere. So maybe I'll see you at Cafe Napoli in Clayton, Napoli Kirkwood, Napoli 2 in Town and Country, Napoli 3 in St. Charles, right next door to Napoli C. Or maybe you'll find me at Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in the Chesterfield Valley. Now you know why I endorse Napoli, NapoliSTL.com.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Now, the end of the story behind the story.
It was July the 25th, 2000, and the unthinkable had happened.
The world's most prestigious aircraft crashes. More than 100 people are dead.
I couldn't believe it because it couldn't crash. It was too magical to crash. Do you know what I mean? It sounds childish, but in your mind it was just forever. And to think people that died, it was just dreadful.
According to Air France, of the 100 passengers, 2 were Danish, 1 was a US citizen, the rest were German.
The crash at Gonesse shocked the world. Now every detail of the final moments of Flight 4590 was scrutinized.
It was a crash that was a classic aircraft accident. It was a whole series of events, and it was the cumulative effect of each of the errors in this error chain that led to the final overwhelming catastrophe.
In other words, there were several things that were happening before it got to that catastrophic level. The things had not been checked properly. And it all goes back partly to some maintenance.
It was a hot July day in Paris, and the Air France Concorde was on a charter flight taking 100 passengers to New York to join a cruise ship. It was fully laden.
The airplane had been overfueled. All the fuel tanks and the wing had been filled up completely full. 19 items of baggage were put in the rear cargo hold, which were never weighed. The net result of all this was that the airplane was over the maximum structural weight.
They were running late, so there was a lot of pressure on the crew to taxi out and take off as quickly as possible and to get to New York non-stop.
By the time it had got to the runway threshold, it had only burnt 800 kilos of the 2,000 kilos of taxi fuel that he had allowed for. And what he should have done was to have burned off all that taxi fuel before he got airborne.
As they went down the runway, the airplane encountered a piece of metal lying on the runway that had come off a Continental Airlines DC-10.
There was a piece of metal left on the runway, but there were also maintenance errors on the part of Air France. In the left-hand undercarriage, which had been worked on by Air France a couple of days before the crash, they'd failed to put back in there a component called the spacer. Without that spacer, the wheels could wobble around like wheels on a supermarket trolley.
In other words, if the disaster did not happen when the tires hit that piece of metal, there might have been another opportunity, certainly another opportunity. When the Concorde was lifting off, that Air France flight 4590, it only flew for maybe 90 seconds as it began to lift off. because when it struck that piece of metal, it threw it into the engine and the blowout that followed.
The tire encountered the piece of metal when the airplane was traveling at 185 miles an hour as the piece of metal cuts in. But it didn't puncture the tire in a conventional way. What it did was scalp the tire. That flew up and hit the underside of the airplane with a tremendous amount of energy.
It set up a shockwave in that fuel tank. There was no airspace in the fuel tank to absorb the energy of that shockwave.
It blew out a piece of metal, not a rupture from inside to out, but a mini explosion from inside, and out came 100 litres a second of fuel. A really massive fire generating a lot of smoke and a lot of unburned fuel, which goes into the engines.
The fire warning went off for the number 2 engine, and the flight engineer, without any discussion with the captain or the first officer at all, just went straight into a fire drill and shut that engine down.
The pilot rotated the aircraft 15 knots early to try and climb away. It went off to the left-hand side of the runway, hit a runway light before getting airborne.
Sadly, staggered into the air. It never remotely reached its in-flight safety speed, which was 220 knots.
They tried to climb away, got to about 200 feet, but couldn't climb anymore. But the real damage was done. The real damage was this massive fire.
This dreadful blowtorch of fuel, flaming fuel, pouring out of tank number 5, causing the centre of gravity to move further rearwards, and this led to the airplane just rearing up.
And once that had happened, really sadly, the airplane and all those on board were doomed.
When a pilot is taking off, they must have the proper speed before they rotate, begin to lift off the tarmac. And you need to know your weight on your plane. And you might need more runway before the takeoff. You might need to increase your speed. You've got to have several things in front of you checked off before you even begin the run down the runway. But as you heard, they clearly were rushing. They wanted to make sure they got off. They wanted to stay on schedule, as they would say in Britain. Keep in mind, they could fly between either Air France or British Airways using the Concorde, could basically cross the Atlantic in under 3.5 hours at 60,000 feet. But in this case, they barely got off the ground. When the pilot lifted up, he had no idea knowing that the rupture tank was going to happen, but it did. The flight engineer, seeing the fire in the engine, his responsibility, shut down the engine without even waiting for an explanation. I've heard folks question if he should have done it. I don't think that would have saved the plane anyway if he'd kept the engine running. It was fully engulfed in flames. If you've ever seen the video, it's a long streak of flames following the plane. Those on board that flight, in addition to the abrupt movement and direction of the plane, many probably could look out and easily see the flames trailing behind them because they were so long. Of course, immediately the investigation began. And eventually, aside from the investigation revealing what you just heard, the Concorde was retired in October 2003. But it was not just that 2000 crash. It was a 9/11 downturn, of course, that happened after 9/11, and high operating cost. But they did, in the final days, schedule more flights, and more folks were anxious to get on board one of those flights.
First one Concorde, then another, a sight never seen before, 3 in all waiting to land.
As we came down, we saw tons and tons of people all waving and shouting and with flags and banners, and all of the fire engines from Heathrow had their hoses on, and they were spraying water all over Concorde as it landed. It was very, very moving because it was totally the end of an era. It was the end of an era.
At the end of the reception, about 10:30 at night, I walked out across the tarmac. I was the last to leave, and there were 5 perfectly serviceable Concords sitting on the ramp, and they would never carry fare-paying passengers again. And that's the time when it really hit me, and that's the time when there was actually literally a tear in the eye.
And again, the failure of the Concorde flights was not just due to that one crash. Numerous airliners and planes have been involved in crashes, and they've made adjustments and moved on, and people were still flying. And there was a rush of folks wanting to be on one of those final Concorde flights. They were willing to do so. The prices were exorbitant, but for many of them, it was nickels and dimes. And they put aside the fear of that crash. There was another issue that kept the Concorde from being seen all across the USA, and that was the sonic booms. In fact, there were lawsuits to prevent the plane from even showing up in the USA. I'm going to talk about that in more detail in our second hour. We're going to carry over the story behind the story into the second hour today, and how they were fighting them throughout the nation and other countries as well. They did not want that plane in their region because of the sonic booms. So we'll be discussing that in more detail coming up in our second hour. The Concorde first flight, March 2nd, 1969. Retired in October 2003. And it was indeed an era that came to an end. That iconic drooping nose allowing it to operate at supersonic speeds. Twice the speed of sound, 1,350 miles per hour. We have not tried that since then. And part of it may be the opposition we'll talk about in our next hour. Tomorrow, another story behind the story. It involves another air tragedy. On the date of tomorrow, the tragic story of the Hindenburg. Our second hour is yet to come. Remember our pledge, one nation under God.
You can hear podcasts of this program at Larry Connors USA Facebook. Larry Connors USA Facebook.
John Bill Roofing reminds you we are in the stormy season, and that means if you have even the smallest leak in your roof, you could soon have a much bigger issue. Call the John Bill to make sure that your biggest investment is protected. That call can save you major dollars. If you do get hit during a storm, John Bill has a rapid response team. Call 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF, John Bill. There's only one place you can get pizza cooked over coals, Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in Chesterfield Valley. Of course, Napoli Brothers has a great selection of pasta dishes. Between the pizza and pasta, trust me, you will not leave hungry. Then, a few doors down, Lit Cigar Lounge, a wide variety of quality cigars, each offering a unique smoke. That cigar, some premium whiskey, all you need to do is enjoy. Lit Cigar Lounge and Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta, Chesterfield Valley. It's that time of season when families, businesses are moving. For local or long distance, I endorse McGuire Moving. Get a date set soon before the schedules are booked. 314-241-0600. 241-0600. McGuire is constantly giving back to our veterans, such as support dogs for our brave. So with McGuire, you're getting excellent service and helping our vets. McGuireMoving.com. So many times, Vincent's Jewelers has helped me surprise someone special. Vincent's locally owned can do the same for you, and you don't have to break the bank to get something really nice, maybe even customized. The smile you're going to get back from that special someone, priceless. Check Vincent'sJewelers.com every day because new items are arriving and there are special deals. Vincent's, my only jeweler. Vincent'sJewelers.com. Vincent'sJewelers.com. Let's be candid, honest. No out-of-state law firm can represent you better than Onder Law, O-N-D-E-R. Hometown roots, attorneys living right here with you and your family. When you suffer an injury because someone else was negligent, Onder Law will make sure the other party takes full responsibility. You'll get full compensation, not a backroom deal worked out with some insurance companies. And, of course, we're moving into the stormy season. And, again, when you have a legitimate claim, you should be properly compensated. Onder Law does not toy around with adjusters, investigators, lawyers trained to cheat you of what is rightfully yours. Onder Law has already recovered millions for families across Missouri and Illinois. Onder wins. Not just a catchy phrase, it's a fact. So I'll repeat it. Onder wins. OnderLaw.com. O-N-D-E-R. OnderLaw.com. Wins.
This is News Talk STL.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
But together with the Republicans in Congress, we've removed nearly 300,000 illegal aliens from the Social Security roll. And we've removed more than 100,000 migrants from Medicare eligibility, 100,000, and the number's going up. What we're really doing is saving Social Security because it was so rife with fraud, and the Democrats didn't care. They couldn't care less. All they care about is Trump derangement syndrome. They are sick. They are lunatics. We're dealing with lunatics. You can do, but I've learned, with time I've learned, if I want something, I go the opposite. In other words, if I want the wall, I say, I will not under any circumstances.
There's Donald Trump talking about 300,000 illegals taken off your Social Security rolls. Money due you. You paid into Social Security. It is not a so-called entitlement. It is your money. But illegals coming into the country in California and other blue states were able to register for Social Security payments. And they were getting health care benefits that you could probably use to help you and your family. Rampant fraud, and they did not care on the left. They do not care about Americans, either as a taxpayer or a vote, unless you're going to do it their way. And their way is often going to be illegal and or an opportunity to enrich yourself. And under the Biden administration, you just simply got away with it. But now the accountability is hitting. Some have already been tried and jailed on some of these charges. But we have so much more that's been going on. And stripping 300,000 illegals from Social Security payments, that's a good start. Welcome to hour number 2, Larry Connors USA. We're here with you every Monday through Friday from 6 to 8 p.m. And reminding you, when we're on the air, you can also watch the program. Go to NewsTalkSTL Rumble, Facebook or Twitter. Larry Connors USA Rumble or Facebook. And everything goes up as a podcast later. Just in case you can't stay with us the entire 2 hours, you can go back and pull up the podcast. And I think you really want to do that today because one of the stories we have in this second hour picks up on a story we had in the first hour. We have started some months ago, I want to say even before the first of the year, something called The Story Behind the Story in the 6 o'clock hour. It may or may not be a story that I was involved in covering directly, and it might or might not be something of historical notice. Sometimes it's a personal story. But today we were focusing on the era of the Concorde jet, that droop-nosed jet that could fly you across the Atlantic in maybe 3 hours, 3.5 tops at 60,000 feet. We discussed it in great detail in the previous hour. So if you missed that hour, I encourage you to go back and pull up hour number 1 of today's program of Larry Connors USA. And in this hour, we're going to talk about part of the issues fighting against the Concorde jet as France and Britain came together to make this Mach 2 supersonic jet. And part of that involved the sonic booms. And many in this nation did not want that happening across our nation. And it was not just the USA that was against it. But, of course, they had that tragic crash in 2000 that did not help the situation. And then shortly behind that came 9/11, again taking money and attention away from the Concorde effort. We'll get into that in more detail for you later in this hour, but you definitely want to go back and pull up the first hour in case you missed it. Let me take a moment to remind you, your cell phone is your radio. I was talking to someone the other day and said, I love your app. I love your app. He said, I was just able to open it up and listen. I said, where were you? Well, he said, I was within range of your signals, but I took your idea and recognizing that I can open up the app on my phone. You can get the app for free, NewsTalkSTL, and I could then play it through the Bluetooth in my car. He said, you have stated, and I agree, that some of your signals sometimes, while they're great, there are differences in variations between weather conditions and other situations that might affect that radio signal. They are great FM signals, two of them. But at the same time, you could get in some areas where the signal might drop out. That's why if you download the app, NewsTalkSTL, on your phone, absolutely free at your app store, NewsTalkSTL, then you can open it up, and whatever program is on the air when you open to start listening, you'll be hearing at that point. And you can play it through the Bluetooth speakers in your car. Which raises a question. Who out there has a radio in their home anymore? I don't have a radio, except for my phone. And that's your connection to us all the time. NewsTalkSTL, wherever you are. Get the app. Make use of it. Supreme Court coming undone in part because of remarks made by one of the members. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, her remarks after the Louisiana redistricting dispute the other day. And Justice Alito, I would say, took her to the shed. Now, I will leave that for you. We'll discuss that in more detail on a little bit later. But he said her remarks were utterly irresponsible. That's strong language coming from a member of the Supreme Court to another member of the Supreme Court. Oh, but you had to allow some for Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson because, if you recall, during her confirmation hearings, she could not really tell you what a woman was. Remember? Dr. Oz, who's overseeing our Medicaid and Medicare disbursements in our nation, says we've been looking into all the hospice fraud just in California and in particular L.A.
This is massive fraud. Now, we've already delisted 450 hospices. That is an unbelievably large number. And guess what? In that first tranche, no one's complained. No one's calling us and saying, no, we are innocent. They know they got caught. They're just going to go off and scam somebody else, which is what's happening, by the way. There's been a 7-fold increase of hospices in Nevada. People flee from California to Nevada. These scumbags just rinse and repeat. They're going to Arizona. They're going to Texas.
Why don't you throw them in jail? Just throw them in jail. I mean, put them in the pokey.
This is a big, big decision point. When you try to put people in the pokey, it takes years of careful investigations. That's how the system is built. But you know what I can do right now, Larry? I can stop paying you. And when we tell several hundred hospices, we're no longer paying you, guess what they do? They shut their doors and they run away.
They shut their doors and run away. And that is true. You stop the payments, they're not going to stay open anymore because they're only there for the payments, not to help Americans. Dr. Oz speaking to Larry Kudlow.
Let's get into the root cause of this problem. Nobody was paying attention. And when thieves steal, they corrupt the entire society. So these busts that you're witnessing here, conducted by Billy Asile, who's the U.S. attorney out there, are the first major efforts to show the people of Los Angeles that we are serious about this problem, which is wanton, out-of-control, rabid fraud, not just in hospice, by the way. There's also personal care services and other areas we'll get into. But let me put the numbers out there so everyone's clear. 1 in 3 hospices in America are in Los Angeles, not California, L.A. 1 in 3. I mean, how many people are dying there? Obviously, it's fraudulent. You have doctors selling their souls, basically, their license number, to open multiple hospice relationships. They dishonestly claim people are dying when they're not. If they steal your money, they will steal your life. They don't care at all about you.
They don't care about you. 1 in 3 were in L.A. You're not talking about the whole state of California, but inside L.A. They were established simply to collect money, steal from the government. And how many Democrats had to know this was going on and did nothing? Look at Minneapolis, Minnesota. Minnesota Governor Walz is facing some real outcry, and rightly so, and possibly you might be able to link him to criminal charges about how the money was abused and stolen within his state, mostly involving the Somalia community. But you know what he just did? He just fired the head of the state agency that oversees disbursement of social services program funding, such as Medicaid and housing. Just fired her yesterday because today she was to be officially confirmed for that position. It put her in that position back in 2025. And so she's been there and in charge. But the heat has gotten so hot. This way he can say, look, when I realized what was going on, I got rid of her. That does not lessen the heat, in my opinion. It turns it up. We'll see how that plays out. As I mentioned, the story behind the story in our first hour, the Concorde jet. It faced numerous issues. And, of course, then there was that disaster in France.
The official French crash report concluded that the piece of metal on the runway had exposed vulnerabilities to Concorde's fuel tanks and tyres. Air France and British Airways grounded their aircraft, while expensive safety modifications were made. They were relaunched in November 2001, but the world had moved on. 2 months before, the attacks on New York's Twin Towers had claimed 2,700 lives. Air travel lost its appeal, and demand for business flights into New York plummeted. Concorde was crossing the Atlantic almost completely empty. Added to that, maintenance costs were soaring, and so in April 2003, Concorde's retirement was announced.
It's the end for Concorde after 30 years of supersonic flying. British Airways and Air France will retire the plane in 6 months' time.
And it was a shame, you know, when you heard the story that it was going to be taken out of service. What a bad day that was. That was horrible. Nobody liked that at all.
Over the next 6 months, there was a rush to take a last flight on Concorde. Every seat was sold, and more flights were added.
More flights even added to accommodate the rush of passengers who wanted a chance. Depending on the design, the Concorde they might be on could have anywhere from 92 to 128 passengers. But it was not just the crash in October, or I should say in 2000 near Paris. That was a major event. But as you heard, they also had the high operating cost and everything that happened after 9/11. But there was an issue facing Concorde even before that in the U.S. in the 70s. Intense public opposition to loud sonic booms and airport noise. Congress and local authorities, notably in New York, tried to block its operation. There were legal battles that went all the way to the Supreme Court to lift the New York City ban in late 77. It was ruled that the Air France and British Airways ban was discriminatory and unfair. So they did begin service at Washington Dulles Airport on May 24th, 1976. Even after the noise bans were lifted, federal legislation did continue to prohibit supersonic flight over the U.S., meaning the Concorde would have to fly at subsonic speeds if it crossed our nation. So they were still trying to keep the plane flying. But the booms of those sonic flights, even in test flights, would startle people, causing windows to crack. If you've ever been near a military base where they have fighter jets taking off from time to time, they're basically under restrictions to keep your speed down over civilian areas. But you can get in some areas and catch at least a distant rumble, if not a more severe rumble. And then you had those claiming that the Concorde was affecting the ozone level. And it was not just the U.S. And keep in mind, breaking the sound barrier even at 60,000 feet was creating protests at airports and picket lines in some runways. In 1972, when the aircraft landed at Sydney Airport, there were a group of demonstrators calling for it to be banned for their region. And before the ban was lifted and slots were awarded at JFK, both Air France and British Airways were looking for other uses. They already knew that if they're going to fly to the U.S., they could only fly into the U.S. They could not go across the U.S. at Mach 2 speed. They started looking at service to Bahrain and Singapore. But they had troubles in Singapore, again, because of the sonic boom. And crossing India to reach Singapore was a suitable option, but India refused to allow it to fly supersonic over its airspace. They developed it. Many people enjoyed it that did fly it. More wanted to, as you heard in those closing days, once they announced they were going to be shutting down. They had to schedule more flights so people could have a chance to fly on it. And it was not cheap. They did consider at one time developing a Concorde just for business class travel. And I don't mean the business class in the jets you're used to, but only high-end business people would be on board. Everything was against the Concorde despite the efforts to create a plane that would fly at Mach 2. Coming up, more on the battle inside the Supreme Court between Justice Jackson and Justice Alito and the others, and also the fraud inside the Southern Poverty Law Center. Again, this is one of the more amazing pieces of fraud carried out by Democrats, liberals. A case where they want you to give money to support their cause, but then they realize they might have already won their cause and their enemies have been vanquished. So what do? Well, why don't we recreate our enemies and feed money to them so we have a boogeyman to fight against? That's exactly what the Southern Poverty Law Center did. Lock and load, ready on the right.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
Spring weather has everyone sneezing, even inside their home or building. Instead of saying Gesundheit, call Wellington Environmental to perform air tests to determine if mold levels are too high. Gesundheit is the same as saying bless you after someone sneezes, the German word meaning wishing you good health. Wellington Environmental can perform air testing that is simple, fast, and can identify issues keeping you from having good health. Wellington does the same for hospitals and nursing homes for indoor concerns. Give them a call. It's simple. 314-644-4930. 644-4930. Tell Cindy, I need air sampling. They've seen it all. They can help you. Next time you hear Gesundheit, think Wellington. Wellington Environmental. Be well with Wellington. McGuire Moving is silver certified, which means they are great at relocating senior citizens. In fact, McGuire is a household name because McGuire understands the stress involved when moving older adults. So if you or family members need help moving, I highly recommend McGuire Moving. 314-241-0600. 241-0600. Get a free in-home estimate. McGuireMoving.com. John Bill Roofing reminds you we are in the stormy season, and that means if you have even the smallest leak in your roof, you could soon have a much bigger issue. Call the John Bill to make sure that your biggest investment is protected. That call can save you major dollars. If you do get hit during a storm, John Bill has a rapid response team. Call 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF, John Bill. So many times, Vincent's Jewelers has helped me surprise someone special. Vincent's locally owned can do the same for you, and you don't have to break the bank to get something really nice, maybe even customized. The smile you're going to get back from that special someone, priceless. Check Vincent'sJewelers.com every day because new items are arriving and there are special deals. Vincent's, my only jeweler. Vincent'sJewelers.com. Vincent'sJewelers.com.
This is News Talk STL.
Oh, baby, when you talk like that, you make a woman go mad. So be wise and keep on reading the signs of my body. I'm on tonight, you know my hips don't lie, and I'm starting to feel you, boy. Come on, let's go real slow. Don't you see, baby, I see us perfect.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
40 years ago, the Southern Poverty Law Center bankrupted the Klan and later recovered millions from neo-Nazi groups, with lawsuits representing victims of violence. But Tuesday, the tables turned. The Justice Department charged the organization with fraud for allegedly misleading donors and lying to financial institutions by paying members of violent extremist groups millions of dollars to act as informants.
The SPLC was not dismantling these groups. It was instead manufacturing the extremism it purports to oppose by paying sources to stoke racial hatred.
Including, the indictment alleges, a leader of the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, who, quote, attended the event at the direction of SPLC, made racist postings under the supervision of the SPLC, and helped coordinate transportation to the event for several attendees. But Law Center interim president Brian Fair said the group had long used informants and called the indictment a political attack by the Trump administration.
They have made no secret of who they want to protect and who they want to destroy.
You have to wonder if this...
Attorney Scott Frederickson questioned the Justice Department's legal theories.
Can the federal government persuade a jury that the Southern Poverty Law Center was out there funding extremism for its own purposes? Manufacturing racism? That's hard to believe. Obviously, they'll have their day in court.
But there have been calls to investigate the Law Center for years. In 1995, the Montgomery Advertiser was the finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for articles alleging that the center was misleading donors and wasting their money. And more recently, critics say that its hate watch list of extremists includes many mainstream conservatives. Tony?
Jan, thank you very much.
That's a report, of course, on the charges against the Southern Poverty Law Center. April 21st is when the Department of Justice announced a federal indictment in Alabama against the Southern Poverty Law Center. 11-count indictment, as you heard, engaged in a long-term scheme to defraud donors by using millions of dollars of contributions to pay, quote, confidential informants inside the KKK and other groups. Do you think anybody that was giving to the Southern Poverty Law Center thinking they were fighting against racial hatred and the Klan and so forth, do you think they would have given a dime if they knew that your money was going to be used to go to a KKK member who was supposedly going to be an informant? 6 counts of wire fraud that the Southern Poverty Law Center misled donors regarding how the money was going to be used. 4 counts of bank fraud, false statements to banks, using shell accounts like Tech Writers Group and Rare Books Warehouse to funnel money to these so-called informants. Conspiracy to commit money laundering. Anytime you start setting up a shell account, you're opening the door for all of these charges. And they're estimating by the prosecution's statement at this point, at least 8 informants got $3 million. That's a lot of information coming from informants. $3 million worth? But the whole idea was to keep people believing there's racism out here. We got to put a stop to it. There's a lady that parks near me, and she has on her van, "Stop Racism," which I agree with. And also on her van, "Black Lives Matter." I thought, you just stepped over the line. Said, "Stop racism," and then you want to tell me Black Lives Matter solely, because that's what it says, Black lives. They do, but so do other lives. So if you're fighting racism, why would you single out saying Black Lives Matter instead of all lives matter? Because that's what they try to do. They try to turn around and use it against you. And in this case, they were actually using the money against the very targets that they supposedly were collecting to use. They were handing them the money. If you ask members of the Southern Poverty Law Center donation group, how about you send $100 to the KKK? Will you do that? Do you think they would? Of course not. But why did they do it? Well, they felt they had to do it because we don't have a boogeyman to fight anymore. If we don't cry racism enough and point to people that are clearly, quote, racist, ignoring our own reflection in the mirror, then we won't get the money. And that brings me to remarks by Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson regarding the Louisiana redistricting case. Ruled by the Supreme Court, she was a lone dissenter, 8-1, that the Louisiana map was gerrymandered on racial profile, not numbers, not even politics, but race. So she made a remark, and she quickly got fired back on by Justice Alito. She was claiming that this was going to take everything back to Jim Crow era, and saying that's what the High Court just ended up doing. Now, when I said she was a lone dissenting vote, I did not mean, I misstated that. She was not the only dissenting vote. 2 others also dissented as well. 6-3 decision. What I meant was that she was using her remarks in such a way that she was calling that this was going to turn the country back to the Jim Crow era. And the remarks from Justice Alito in a response to what she said, he tore into Ketanji Brown Jackson, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, saying her arguments were baseless and insulting. Alito wrote, her dissent, goes on to claim that our decision represents an unprincipled use of power, adding that that was a groundless and utterly irresponsible charge. Jackson claims the Supreme Court was involved in overreach and basically favoring Donald Trump. The High Court's order was going to allow Louisiana officials to move quickly forward without changing their congressional map, but making it clear that the map as it was drawn was basically gerrymandered on race. And those against it say this was disrupting the Voting Rights Act. And that's when Ketanji Brown Jackson went over the line. And Alito wrote that the dissent accuses the court of unshackling itself from constraints. It is the dissent's rhetoric that lacks restraint. Now, those words don't sound that harsh. But when you consider it's a Supreme Court justice addressing a fellow colleague on the High Court, they're extremely strong. Jonathan Turley, a Fox News analyst, George Washington law professor, said this tone of Alito suggests a deeper internal friction. I think he's right. And Turley stated in one piece he wrote, Justice Alito had had enough. He noted that her reliance on the 32-day period was a trivial objection that put form above substance since no party had asked for reconsideration. It would be waiting for 32 days for no purpose, while the other parties had stated a reasonable and pressing need, finalize the opinion so we can get forward, moving forward with what we're going to do in Louisiana. The Supreme Court does have a procedural rule that allows 32 days before judgment is officially sent down to the lower courts. Jackson was claiming that that's how the court went off the rails. Alito said, no, the rule is flexible. It's intended primarily to allow time for rehearsing or rather rehearing petitions, and neither side signaled we need more time. She is, of course, the newest member of the Supreme Court, and I would say also the least qualified. But Justice Alito, to quote Jonathan Turley again, had had enough. How a woman, black, white, Democrat, Republican, gets on the Supreme Court when she cannot even answer a confirmation hearing what is a woman, how she even gets to the court, is beyond answer. But it happened during the Biden era. That's how it happened. And she's going to face a lot of cases involving, quote, women. Will she be able to know what a woman is? Coming up, a Republican claims to be Republican says, many of you who voted for Trump, you won't even admit you know him in the next 5 to 10 years. That's part of what we have before we wrap up this hour.
You can connect with Larry on Twitter at Larry Connors USA.
When insurance companies know you're represented by Under Law, they know Under is not going to let you be pushed around. Their reputation is built on years of courtroom battles. If you suffer an injury or damage to your property, serve the insurance company notice. You have Under Law on your side, a St. Louis firm you can trust to protect you at every term. Don't settle for less. You want to win? Believe me, Under wins. Under, O-N-D-R, underlaw.com. McGuire Moving is Silver certified, which means they are great at relocating senior citizens. In fact, McGuire is a household name because McGuire understands the stress involved when moving older adults. So if you or family members need help moving, I highly recommend McGuire Moving. 314-241-0600. 241-0600. Get a free in-home estimate. McGuireMoving.com. When I have business clients or guests from out of town, I often take them to Cafe Napoli. I know they're going to enjoy any of the Napoli locations. Cafe Napoli in Clayton, Napoli 2 in Town and Country, Napoli 3 in St. Charles, next to Napoli C, Napoli Kirkwood, or Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in the Chesterfield Valley. Excellent food and intellectual conversation, if they bring the intellectual conversation. And NapoliSTL.com. NapoliSTL.com. You should know that when I endorse Wellington Environmental, it's because I believe and know they will do you right. Wellington takes pride in providing homeowners and businesses whatever they need. You need some dustless blasting, they will take care of that. You need some mold remediation, they can do that. They take pride in training their team to perform multiple services and having the equipment ready to get jobs finished. That's important to you. You make just one call, and you call a company that's been around for more than 35 years with more than 45 technicians in the field. Most of you know finding good workers, then having them show up on time could be difficult. Not for Wellington Environmental. They're there at the designated time, ready to go. Check them out to see what they could do for you. Dustless blasting or anything else you need. Wellington Environmental, 314-644-4930. 314-644-4930. Be well with Wellington.
This is News Talk STL.
People keep on learning. Soldiers keep on warring.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
The White House briefly went under lockdown after a suspect allegedly shot at Secret Service just 4 blocks away. Here by the Washington Monument, the Secret Service said officers spotted a gun and tried to stop a man who allegedly fled and fired in the direction of the Secret Service.
Not long before this shooting occurred, the Vice President's motorcade did transit through this area.
Officers returned fire, hitting the suspect. A young bystander also was struck in the crossfire.
The juvenile did not sustain any life-threatening injuries, but he's also receiving treatment at the hospital.
And that is a report on that gunman shot near the Washington Memorial yesterday, Washington Monument, I should state. And as you heard in the report, he had been seen with a gun, and as they tried to contact him, he ran from them and then turned and fired in the direction of agents and officers. They returned fire. No report on the condition of the man being shot. He is obviously in custody. A child described only as a juvenile was also hit by a bullet during that exchange of gunfire. Not clear which bullet from which gun shot the child. But all this playing out following the White House Correspondents' Dinner. The reason the word Texas slipped in there is because I was thinking, I don't know if I told you again that the guy they're now identifying is from Texas. Yes, Texas has its fill of crazies as well. And this guy went all the way to D.C. and decided to carry out something. We don't know what yet. But if he's going to shoot at Secret Service agents, I think you get an idea. There are so many in this nation right now that believe violence is an acceptable form of not just fighting back, but just criticism. Charlie Kirk died at the end of an assassin's rifle. Trump was almost assassinated on a campaign stop before he got elected. And now we have additional threats against him. And there is one remark from one guy that I think stands out more than even the seashell incident of James Comey. And this guy, I think, should also be indicted or charged. I think there might be reason for it, but let me lay it out for you. This is the guy that owns a brewing company in Minnesota. I should correct that, Wisconsin. And he is now announcing that he's going to run for governor of Wisconsin because he said, I think we need a battle-hardened fighter to join the rest of our nation to save our democracy from the Trump regime. This guy in the brewing company he owns, I'm not going to mention the name of it. You can look it up if you want. I could care less. His brewery had advertised free beer in the event of Donald Trump's death. Now, he had made the offer prior to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And then he followed up with a post said, well, we almost got a hashtag free beer day. Either a brother or sister in the resistance needs to work on their marksmanship, or he, talking about Trump, faked another assassination to get positive news cycle. We'll never know. Regardless, we stand ready to pour free beer the day it happens. If that's not advocate and encouraging kill the president, I don't know what does. I mean, that goes well beyond, in my opinion, former FBI Director Comey taking pictures of shells on the beach, which he says he just found and he didn't know the meaning. Lie. And this guy advertising free beer the day Trump dies. There is a politician who calls himself a Republican, but his actions are not inside the Republican era that I know. They are way outside. In fact, they are really into the left. But he thinks he's pretty special stuff. He served as an Illinois congressman. Some of you listening might have voted for him. Adam Kinzinger. You know what he says about you if you voted for Trump? Just listen.
I just feel bad for the people that are being misled down this path. But I guarantee you something, and I know this. In 5 or 10 years, there won't be a single person left in this country that will ever admit to supporting Donald Trump, except for those that have their stuff all over Twitter. Because I think the speed at which he's spiraling, I mean, we're a year and a half into him. The speed at which he's spiraling, I think, is just going to increase. And eventually people are going to be like, yeah, we've had enough.
We've had enough. But for him to state, Adam Kinzinger, who left Congress, decided not to run again. And, of course, he was really big on the January 6th. He was a member of the committee that got selected by Nancy Pelosi. She said, it's bipartisan. We have Henry Kinzinger of Illinois. He's a Republican. He's on it. But they wouldn't let the Republicans on that Republicans wanted on the committee. And they let this lackey get on the board, the committee. And now he's saying, I do believe that in 5 to 10 years, folks are not even going to admit that they voted for Donald Trump. Let me repeat his statement again. I guarantee you something, and I know this. In 5 or 10 years, there won't be a single, just consider that, a single person, even if he said only one person, but he didn't say that. He said there won't be a single person left in the country that will ever admit to supporting Donald Trump, except for those who have their stuff all over Twitter and so forth. By the way, there's a battle going on inside the Democrat Party. Boy, that does tear me up, but I'm going to share it with you. It's focusing on California. The Democrat Congressional Campaign Committee added a California State Assembly member and 7 other Democrats to its Red to Blue program. That's a de facto endorsement that also gives a candidate they choose extra money to fight against GOP incumbents. But at the same time they did that, supporting one candidate over another Democrat. They're going against a selection Bernie Sanders was backing. And progressives are saying, we disagree with our Democrat Congressional Committee campaign. They're tipping the scales in this race. That's from the Progressive Caucus PAC leaders. They've endorsed the guy that Bernie Sanders thinks is definitely the right person for California. So you got Democrats in California divided and fighting, and they're afraid that they will end up losing to the incumbent Republican. Then they might well. I hope they do. But I love the infighting inside their own party. Every party has it. I'm not going to say it's just the Democrats. Oh, I want to ask you a question. Not even going to ask how much you paid for gasoline today. But depending on where you bought it, do you know how much you paid in taxes? Or regardless if you're listening to me in Louisiana, D.C., Hawaii, California, you still have a federal tax on gasoline. What would you think about a federal tax holiday on gasoline? And is the Iran war at a point now where Trump would consider that? And how much would it mean to you? We'll take a look at that. And before that, yesterday, President Trump was honoring and celebrating small business in our nation. His support means a lot to those businesses.
I just want to say he's amazing. He's done so much. I mean, so much for all of us. I mean, the backbone of this country is small business, plain and simple. And the last guy in office, all we heard was that we were the evil people, we were the bad people, everything else like that. We don't pay our fair share, whatever that's supposed to be. And he made it tough. And this guy, the big beautiful bill, absolutely amazing. You know what I mean? God bless you for letting me get 100% depreciation. It really helps out. And all I can say is this is literally, I mean, I'm a history buff, and I know a lot about this White House thing and everything. Literally, he's going to go down as maybe the best president ever. I love this guy.
You think that guy would be found 5-10 years from now admitting he just said that, according to Adam Kinzinger of Illinois? That's Rick Harrison, host of the Hardcore Pawn Shop show, another small business. And, of course, if you have a small business and you have to buy gasoline to fuel your trucks, your equipment, you might be feeling a pinch more than the average driver would. There's talk of maybe having a federal tax holiday. That's being sparked more because of the increase in cost right now. But I've told you, and you should understand, they're going to fluctuate as long as the Iran situation exists. And I want to re-stress to you, our issue in Iran and the Strait of Hormuz is not just oil prices coming and going, benefiting Iran or the U.S., but Iran continuing to get money for their oil and gas to continue building their nuclear project, the weapons project. Every gallon of gasoline that you buy has a federal excise tax, 18.4 cents a gallon for gasoline, 24.4 cents per gallon for diesel. It's been unchanged since 1993. So many are saying this is a perfect time to, one, either roll it back or take a holiday from it. These are populist proposals from high-profile Democrats because they're wanting to point out that you have to do it because Trump has set the market upside down. You need to blame him, but we would step forward and help you reduce your taxes. Yeah, right. What they take from one hand and give to the other, you're going to lose change in the center. But Congress would have to approve a suspension of the federal gas tax, and it never has. Pump costs are spiking this week, obviously. According to AAA, $4.48 per gallon on average. But you got to keep in mind, the state tax. It does depend on where you live. In California, their tax rate for every gallon of gasoline is above 60 cents per gallon. So whatever they're paying, deduct 60 plus cents in California, that would help the California drivers, would it not? Isn't that where so many Democrats are? Why don't they push through California legislation to strip that money out and save and maybe pick up votes in California? Because they know that would spell disaster. Not just for their party, but for their economy in California. And it's already in a death spiral. In late April, when gasoline prices were lower but still well above $4, a bipartisan policy center estimated that suspending the federal tax could cut retail prices by 9 to 14 cents per gallon. They point out that most, but not all, would get passed along to consumers. That's because suppliers would also take a tax cut, or rather take a cut of that money. And then you add a tax holiday, depending on the duration, it would slash federal revenues used for maintaining the nation's highways. And we still have people in this nation complaining constantly about the price. If it's tough on you, I do feel for you. And if it's tough for you in your business, I do feel for you. But I feel more for our men and women in danger right now, and the world would be in danger if Iran got a nuclear weapon. I can't stress enough to those who are opposed to what we're doing in dealing with Iran. It's not just an oil and gas issue. It's trying to keep them from having a nuclear weapon. You've seen what their terrorists would do with 9/11 and everything else. Do you think they would not use it? Of course they would. California and Illinois, some of the highest combined state taxes everywhere, of anywhere. Maybe you need to go back and remember history to some extent. You continue to let your enemy get away with everything, they will use it against you. I put country above what I'm paying for fuel and anything else. What about you? As always, I appreciate you listening. Spread the word. We'll be back here tomorrow at 6. And remember, with Larry Connors USA, you're also going to get an education. Remember our pledge, one nation under God.